Hey, what's up you guys? So I'm coming to you another video, and you know what? Recently I got the opportunity to work with the LA Times on a segment, video, focus group, talking about Filipinos, Catholicism, mental health, right? You know, and going into this, I kind of already knew this was going to be very LA Times, left-leaning, very progressive, and in the application it already asked for my pronouns. So yes, it was going to be that direction. You know, I wanted to get into this to, you know, get to hear what other people got to talk about, but already I kind of had an idea what they were trying to go with and have this kind of like this premise that they're going to view this in a colonial mindset and very, you know, put Catholicism in a negative light, you know. And I really wanted an opportunity to combat that, because I think they're coming from this idea that Catholicism may be weighing you down, kind of like shackling you down, that it's old news and everything. But I want to give the opposite, that I think, you know, Catholicism, Christianity, religion is something that is beautiful and something that can be celebrated. So I really wanted the opportunity to work with that, hear other people's viewpoints and everything. And so, you know, this video is super long. I'll definitely put in some clips about this, some highlights, but I just want to show you guys the full clips. So yeah, so please like, share, and subscribe, and let's roll it.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and just kick things off. We have time, a lot more time for our discussion. We really want to get into that. So this is basically our agenda for what we're going to be going over today. I'm Agnes Constante. I'm a freelance journalist, and I'm working on a 4-part series for the LA Times about Filipino-American mental health. So the first 2 stories of the series have already been published. There is one on colonial mentality, another one on cultural values. I'll be working on one about substance use, and then one about Catholicism, which is what this focus group will be about today. And the reason that we're holding this focus group is really to, so that we can hear from all of you to shape the direction of this story. Catholicism is such a broad topic. There's so many ways that, you know, I could write about it. And so I just want to hear from all of you to kind of help me figure out what direction to take the story in. And also I know that there's such a vast range of experiences that people have had with Catholicism as well. So we want to hear about all of those experiences and figure out how to, you know, fit, you know, all these multiple perspectives into the story. So I also just want to take a moment to introduce our facilitators for today. I will not be facilitating a group. I'm going to be kind of visiting all the groups around so I can kind of hear what every group is discussing. But then we have 4 folks from the LA Times who will be facilitating the groups today. So I will let Ada introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ada. I'm the assistant editor at the LA Times lead journalism team, and I'm one of the editors on this project. Nice to meet you, I guess.
Hi, I'm Matt Ballinger. I'm the editor of that same utility journalism team, and I'm really eager to hear what everyone has to say today, and I'm very grateful that you're all here. It's going to be really interesting, and looking forward to chatting with you. Go ahead, Jonah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, guys.
Darren's here. Yeah, my name's Jonah. I'm a reporter with the LA Times. Really excited to be here, and just glad I can help out and to hear from all of you.
Great. And then we also have Fee, who was copied in the email. She's not going to be facilitating today, but she'll just be sitting in to observe. So Fee, do you want to introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about why you're sitting in today?
Sure, yeah, I'm Fee. I'm a data and graphics journalist at the LA Times. And like Agnes said, I'm not a facilitator, but I'm planning on doing a listening session for another story about mental health in the AAPI community. Excuse me. Specifically, I'm looking at like the words and phrases and language that the community uses to talk about mental health, both in English and Asian languages, and how things like cultural factors and family expectations can affect this. So that's why I'm listening in and observing this listening session. If anyone is interested in talking about that, feel free to reach out. I think we'll have more on how to do that at the end.
Cool. So I think I'll just go over some of the basic housekeeping stuff so we can all kind of start out on the same page. So stay muted when you're not talking, just to reduce background noise. Share the video if you want. I'm glad to see a lot of people have their videos on, because I think it's nice to see people's faces and, you know, kind of chat about these things. If you don't feel comfortable for any reason, or you need to turn your video off, it's totally fine. Sometimes, you know, we start talking about things that are hard or you need to take a break, and that's totally fine. Use the group chat to share ideas, questions, or links, and then feel free to message one of us privately if anything comes up. And just kind of a reminder that this is like a chat beginning of a conversation. So as you're sort of thinking about these things, if there's anything that, you know, maybe you want to like prefer to share with Agnes personally later, that's always an option. And then if you have any tech issues, go ahead and contact Agnes. That's the her cell phone number there. And then some conversation guidelines. I don't know, Agnes, are you going to talk about like how it's like on background and that kind of stuff, or should I go over that during the conversation guidelines?
Oh, yeah, maybe you can, do you mind going over that?
Yeah. Okay, so all of this, before I go into the conversation guidelines, all of this is on background. That means that we'll be recording it just so Agnes can kind of like, you know, have the information so it can kind of guide her project, but none of you will be like quoted for anything. If any of you are, if Agnes is interested in talking to you later for like an official interview, you know, where you could potentially be quoted for a story, then that's something that would happen after this session. So like for this stuff, maybe we're looking for like trends or kind of like basic kind of ideas that pop up. So, you know, we might refer to some things that pop up in this session broadly, but none of it will be attributed to you. If anyone has any questions about that, we can go more into that. But so for the guidelines, we just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable. So like try to use I statements for, you know, for something like this, like talking about Catholicism, religion is so personal, and really like mental health is so personal, right? Like, so we want to talk about like our own experiences, not necessarily like, you know, what everybody like kind of assume what our experiences are, you know, everybody else's experiences. Take space, make space. Sort of, we have a certain amount of time, so we want to make sure everyone has a chance to share. So sort of be a little bit mindful of like how much you're talking, and then sort of kind of make space for people who might not be as extroverted, I guess. Use both and thinking. That goes back to, you know, what I was saying, the idea that, you know, if somebody says something and that's not your experience, that doesn't necessarily negate your experience. So we're just kind of all sharing our own personal stories. And then whatever happens in the conversation stays in the conversation. It's definitely true for us as journalists. We're not gonna, you know, share anything you say, but if, you know, just as you guys participating in the session, it'd be great if, you know, you didn't share anything that your fellow breakout room participants are sharing. And then at the end of the day, take care of yourself. You know, we really appreciate the time that you're taking to talk to us about this. And I mean, I think mental health in general, it can be a hard thing to talk about. So the most important thing is for you guys to kind of take care of yourself.
Thanks, Ada. Okay, so for everyone to more minutes. And then we'll come back at the end for a little bit of time for us to share back like some of the big themes that came up in the conversation. And then we'll have time for questions, and then we'll wrap up. So I'll open up the breakout rooms. And then also, again, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my cell in the chat if you have any technical issues that come up. Okay, so I'll open it up and I'll see you all back in about 30 or 40 minutes.
Hey everybody, welcome.
Okay, so pause real quick. This is the moment in the virtual chat Zoom that I saw one of my friends, David, in it. So I'm like hype. I don't want to give it away that we know each other, but I was like, I was so ready. I was so excited. I was so down. So it was so great. So yeah.
If I didn't catch you in the main thing, my name is Jonah. I am joining you from Koreatown. In fact, let's see what. I'm going to literally joining you from Koreatown. Okay. Oddly enough, this church actually is a Catholic church on Wilshire Boulevard. So very on topic. Anyway.
That's where I got baptized.
Where? Okay. Wow. Okay. That's so cool. I'm glad it has significance for you, and so appropriate. Could you just so we could break the ice even more, just remind me your name and where you're calling from, and we'll just go around. I'll just call it as I see the tiles here. Brian?
Yeah, my name is Brian. I am out of Silver Lake.
Nice, thanks. Joe?
I am calling in from Dallas, Texas.
Okay, welcome, Joe. And Jamie?
Jamie Borromeo calling from Chino Hills, California.
Nice, nice. And Jerick?
Hi, I'm Jerick Anton. I'm calling in from Camarillo.
Great. And David?
Hi, I'm David Actrap. I'm calling in from North Hollywood.
Great, welcome, welcome. And Mitch?
Hey, what's up? My name's Mitch. Calling from Las Vegas, but hometown is Granada Hills, 818. What up?
Nice, nice. And Jeff?
Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm based in LA, but I'm calling in, believe it or not, from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Argentina, oh my God, glad you could join us. Are you 3 hours ahead? Are you East Coast time?
4. We're another hour ahead of East Coast.
Got you.
Yeah,
got you.
I'm working remotely from here, so, you know, kind of like, why not?
Yeah, I was gonna say Jamie's the furthest, but it looks like Jeff. Yeah, okay, cool. I'm gonna hit record now, if that's okay with everybody.
Recording in progress.
First question, we'll just go right into it. And I will be dropping them into the chat as we go. And just another reminder, we have 40 minutes, so just be mindful of that in your responses. But how does your family practice Catholicism? What does it mean to you to be a Filipino-American Catholic or a Filipino-American who practices Catholicism? It's basically just like, what are some just general practices that your family does specifically with Catholicism? What does it look like? And just, you know, any personal experiences with it, like personal meaning, personal significance, whether that's at one point in life growing up or, you know, now as that's evolved maybe. And, you know, how does that relate to specifically being Filipino-American Catholic? Okay, so great. Thanks for dropping in the chat here. Let's see, when you say family, are you talking about immediate or extended? It could be either. It could be, yeah, let's approach it as broad as we want.
I can start.
Okay.
So born and raised in the church. My parents sent me to Catholic schools, Catholic grade school, Jesuit high school. It's a Catholic college, Catholic masters. So yeah, I've been all in with my faith my whole life. I realized at about, let's say, 4th grade that I was more Catholic than my parents when I wanted to go to mass and they didn't. And when we got involved in like altar serving or doing music at mass, like that was like the reason that my parents would go. It's like just to see us, maybe not necessarily perform, but you're like, oh, okay, there's my kids doing their thing. It's always been a part of it, but it hasn't been super emphasized from my parents. I think I got a lot of mine from school and from other kind of mentor teacher type stuff. Flash forward to funeral of my grandma, funeral of my cousin. Like I was kind of like the go-to, like, well, who here knows how to talk to a deacon, talk to a priest, and figure out all these details kind of stuff. And I was kind of like the lead on that, especially since I had a theology degree and doing that kind of stuff already for the church. Yeah, a lot of my family were defaulting to me since I knew what I was doing, or I knew what we were supposed to be doing. So they planted seeds, but it wasn't necessarily super enforced, I guess. And from my parents' perspective, it was more of a cultural thing than a deep devotion.
Right. Thanks for sharing, Joe. And Jamie, I know I think you were about to speak as well.
Yeah, so this is a complicated question for me because I actually joined this. I have a 4-year-old, and I've been really thinking about what kind of spiritual path I want to teach her. because Catholicism has been very complicated for me. So I grew up in a family that was extremely devout Catholic. My Lolo used to take me to mass every day when I was a kid. I was an altar server. I helped put weddings on. It was an integrated part of my identity as a child. So much so that I'd like carry around my Bible in high school. I was part of this community called Spirit of Love in Rowland Heights. And it was a charismatic community. So it integrated some of like the Protestant practices of like, speaking in tongues or like using charismatic music versus the more like solemn way that most Catholicism practices. And they were very big about like not going to hell and not sinning. And so I was going to confession like every week in high school. So then I went to UC Santa Cruz in college, which is a super liberal college. And I think that it kind of opened my eyes that other people live differently. And I think I was kind of shielded because I grew up in the Filipino community. So there were a lot of Asian Americans and Filipinos around me. Whereas, I go to Northern California and it's like a lot of non-practicing Catholics. And so I started to experiment with my journey with spirituality. And it got to the point where I feel like in my family, they gave me the training wheels to have a spiritual practice of sorts. But now as an adult, I have a really different view. Like I started to adopt more like Buddhist practices, started to go to yoga. And those are things in Catholicism that are like, you're not supposed to do that. So, like I'm kind of a closeted, like spiritual person per se, because if I talk about other practices I have, then it's judged. Like for so long, I lied to my grandparents and my mom about going to mass. And I would just tell them, they'd ask, oh, did you go to mass? And I would just say, yeah, I went to mass, just because I didn't want to deal with the cultural burden of disappointing them and feeling the shame that comes associated with not being Catholic. But I also believe that like now that I have a 4-year-old daughter and my husband was raised Christian and I was raised Catholic, he and I, again, have a spiritual practice, but isn't focused on a religion. We take her to the mat. We work out with her. We like get her on a yoga mat. We teach her how to center, but like at the same time, I feel kind of guilty. Like I should have something that is structured the way I was raised. But I have that tension of like the judgment that came with being Catholic as a child. And I don't want to put that burden on my daughter, and I respect so many different paths. Like if you are Catholic, that's fantastic to me. If you're something else, that's fantastic to me. And so I guess it's a complicated question for me because what does it mean to be a Filipino-American Catholic? Like there's so much hiding and shame when you don't identify as Catholic. But then there's like this other joy of like the nature of the Filipino culture where people are kind and, people think of the whole. And I can see the fruits of where Catholicism's roots have really helped to make our culture so beautiful, but also the parts that are so painful about our identities. So it's such a complicated, loaded question. So I get why you guys are doing this because people are going to have really different experiences with it. And for me, like I'm working through the pain portions of it as a mother in order to feel okay with sending her to church.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jamie. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the second question in, but I still would encourage people to answer that first question. But since I'm hearing both Joe and Jamie kind of address some things in the second question, I'll go ahead and share that now. Yeah, so this question, talks about your upbringing and how the teachings in church kind of, what kind of impact it had on your life. And like it says here, we're specifically interested in what role did it play when times were challenging. I know, Joe, you mentioned the death of your grandparents, your grandma, and like leaning on, religion for, navigating that experience. And yeah, feel free to give any specific examples. So yeah, anyone else want to start with the first question, what it means to you to be Filipino-American Catholic, and then feel free to share and just expand on that a little and how it's impacted your life.
I can go. I'm actually really glad that Jamie's here because I had a really large trepidation coming in. I'm sort of the polar opposite of Joe when it comes to like I had the main drivers of Catholicism in my family were mainly from my dad's eldest sister, And I believe everybody else in my family just kind of did it to fit that cultural, the cultural expectation. Like I did go to, CCD when I grew up. I grew up in New Jersey, went to CCD in the East. But I feel like that, my parents, I went through First Communion, confirmation. They didn't push me really to do anything other than that. But when my parents moved to California and were closer to my extended family, when I would come home from college, there'd be this very big, it felt like, tides shifted, and that, we would be going to church more often and stuff like that. Whereas like Sundays were more of a time for, closeness with the family. Like church was a way for us to lift us out of the house, get us into a place where we could, center ourselves, and then, go have Chinese food later. And, those are the moments that I would remember. Going into how that has sort of affected my life, I've always seen, my Catholicism as especially since I've been married and I've known my wife for about 20 years, and she is pretty much atheist. And, we definitely kind of pushed back against, having our wedding in a church. We had a Christian priest, not a Catholic priest. It was definitely trying to balance. I think that's really part of the mental health part of it for me, is that expectation. The shame is really what, for me defined, what Catholicism was. When I go back to the Philippines and, my family's from the Visayas, and I'd interact there, there's always that lingering dread I'd have about like, I'm not practicing those lies about going to church, those things like that. But like, Joe's story about his grandmother reminded me of my own. And while I never really dove into the teachings, it was more just the human connection that created. Like when we were together at Thanksgiving, and we would say grace and things like that, it was always that feeling of like connection that I would pull out of it, and never really went farther than that for, reasons ranging from, I'm very, very liberal compared to my parents and my extended family. So, there are a lot of like exterior forces that have shaped, my mental health and my relationship with my faith. But yeah, I've always seen it as sort of like a connection, a way to connect with my family in ways that, since I do stuff they don't get, I'm very into tech and stuff like that. So
yeah, thanks for sharing, Brian. And that reminds me, that second part of the question is, what role did it also play when times were good? And that connection definitely is something that's positive that you hold on to with family. So does anyone else want to share? Jeff?
Yeah, I can chime in. That second question is really interesting, because I think for me, I mean, in a positive way, there's that benefit of, having a sense of morality and knowing what's right and wrong. And I would, I guess, credit the Catholic upbringing for providing that degree of morality. And, like the constant, there's a constant striving to be a good person, whatever that means. And, it feeds, it's for me, it fed the sense that, okay, I'm a good person. God sees me as a good person, and therefore, he's on my side, or like, no trouble will befall me or whatever. I think just that sense of, confidence that you are a good person because you go to church, you don't do bad things, maybe like a little bit of, stealing lunch money here and there kind of thing, but overall, like you're not a bad person. Yeah, it does kind of set you up for thinking, at least for me, it did set me up to thinking that, okay, I'm a good person, I'm a good moral person. But as you get older, as I got older, I a lot of things just unraveled, and I started asking a lot of big existential questions, like, why why is there death? Why is there suffering? You know, what does it mean to encounter suffering in this life as a Catholic? And this ties back to the first question, where it's just heavily for me the biggest actors for my Catholic upbringing were my grandmother on my mother's side and my mom. Their Catholicism is just heavily ritual based, heavily Mary centered, very Mary centered, and I think it's just really unique to Catholicism because they just love praying the rosary a lot. And you know, after when you pray the rosary, to them it's just like I have observed them coming out of it a sense of sort of superiority or a greater level of connection. And to me, it's just like it's just babbling words. And you know, there's maybe you'll feel a sense of spiritual high, but you know, my knees hurt because I've been kneeling for hours on end. You know, I'm falling asleep because this praying through the rosary goes on and on and on. And my mom especially is a huge believer in the different saints and in what, you know, saint this is the patron saint for X. And on a certain day in the Catholic calendar is dedicated to that saint. And so she will, in some cases, she'll make all of us as a family go to church, or she'll make me, when I was older and I could drive, she'd make me drive her to church. And then, you know, that's just like ingrained and something that just kind of makes her keep going or something. And just to me, and even my sister, we're just kind of like, you know, what is really the meaning of this? And, you know, why most of the time we've asked ourselves, like, why are we being dragged into this? If there's supposed to be love, if we're supposed to do this as a family. I consider myself non-religious. In my broader family, my dad's side is very Protestant, very evangelical, charismatic, all kinds of things. Some Catholic, but on my mom's side is very Catholic because of the heavy influence of my grandmother. And there was a point in time where I had evangelical relatives talk to me about Jesus, and I already know about Jesus. But the thing is, like, they would talk about, like, hey, do you know that Jesus loves you? Hey, do you know that he's knocking at the door of your heart? Hey, do you know that you have the opportunity to receive him? And I mean, to a young Catholic, I had gone to Catholic school in the Philippines. You know, I'd been familiar with some Catholic teaching, but just the appeal of like, oh, you can receive Jesus, and was like, okay. But then fast forward to, you know, when these relatives baptized me and my mom found out, she was very, very, very displeased. And for many years afterwards, I mean, I considered myself at that point kind of in between evangelical Protestant and Catholic. And then recently I, you know, disavowed both. But looking back, that was just a huge point of tension between my mom and the rest of, you know, the non-Catholic family members. So I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. So, cradle Catholic from a childhood and everything, and so did communion, confirmation and everything. And so even out throughout college, I went to church regularly. I think I would practice a lot more than my peers. And then even in now, like, so I feel like, especially during 2018, my spiritual life has exploded, and so totally in every practicing Catholic way. And so growing up, I think there was, with all my cousins and going to like, I'm not, you're familiar with going to Santo Niño and everything. So it was this level of uniformity that I find very comforting when I'm talking to my parents or when I'm talking to my cousins. I don't have to really debate about spirituality because we're all Catholic. So I found that level of comfort. So much so, I think I'm in the Air Force, and so when I went to like downsides in my life, it was always Jesus that I was coming back to. When I go to a different base, I'm like looking at the closest Catholic church, so I want that solid ground for me, you know. And there was times in boot camp, and there's times in my lower life that I feel like I have to put my everything that I'm suffering at the foot of the cross. And so to me, I find it so beautifully in the Catholic Church that I can do that. I pray the rosary, I pray all this stuff. So I view it in a different way, that there was so much intellectual and spiritual beautifulness that I find in Catholicism. So I come from a different viewpoint from the everyone else here, or at least the folks that have mentioned. I find so much beauty in the Catholic Church that it has strengthened me. And I'm not saying that's easy, you know, like I constantly ask, what does God want for me? You know, like, why did this bad thing happen to me? Like, how am I being tested? And I can see that could be like other people saying that's gaslighting yourself and all that stuff. But I still find, again, it's not, I think the struggle and the sacrifice, that is what salvation is, you know. Like, there is the beautiness and in that struggle, because we are called to like bring our sufferings to Jesus. And I love that I can center myself and pray and go to Jesus and be like, hey, I need your help, and he's right there with me. And so I find so much beauty in the Catholic Church. And so I just want to share that, because I understand everyone's perspective and everything, and I that's great. But in my personal life, I find so not just humbling, but I find so much humility in Catholicism. So I just wanted to share how I personally believe it is beautiful. So
yeah, thanks for sharing, Mitch. And you're right. You know, there's always going to be a diversity of experience, and like where people, you know, how people, you know, experience it through, you know, different moments in life. You know, different moments with family. It'll shape it in a different way. And like everyone's kind of already answering this question, so I'll just drop it in the chat for those who haven't. I know I want to hear from you, David, and Jerick as well. But what impact has Catholicism had on your identity, and how has it affected the way you view yourself? Yeah, and I feel like you know, most have already been kind of sharing that. But if, you know, for those who haven't shared yet, Jerick and David, feel free to answer that more directly, and then we'll circle back to everyone else if you had more to say with respect to that. So do either of you want to go, Jerick or David?
I'll go. So I grew up in Kentucky. This was about 10 years ago. So Filipinos, especially Filipino-American Catholics, they like to stick together like rice in small pockets. And I mean, like in the boonies, they're all praying the rosary. And growing up, like I remember praying the rosary with my mom and dad, and I remember when I think I was in like 8th grade, we dropped it. And in high school, I was trying to figure some things out. I was joining like some charismatic communities, trying to figure out what is this. And then I went to Los Angeles, and I was like, bye, Mom and Dad. See ya. I'm going to do my own thing. And so that's where I moved to North Hollywood. There's a church there, St. Charles Borromeo. And I was really a truth seeker. And like, obviously I was like going through the motions, Sunday Mass, that's cool. But I think what was happening at that church, there was a young priest. He was Korean. I thought he was Filipino. There was a community of young adult Catholics, and I've never seen a group of young Catholics wanting to share their faith. And I think one thing about being Filipino-American Catholic is like you want to find a sense of identity. I was trying to find a sense of identity as a Catholic, but also as a Filipino. First of all, in Kentucky, there's a lot of Caucasians and there's not that many Filipinos. So you come out here, there's like a diverse amount, and I'm like, how do I even act around my own Filipino brethren? So it's really interesting. But in college, I went through to Eucharistic Adoration, and I think that's something that maybe, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with that, but that's when people started telling me about Eucharistic Adoration and having like a close, intimate relationship with Jesus. A few years ago, I went to World Youth Day, and I've seen like Catholics who are Filipino from all around the world, who some of them don't even speak English, but I was like, wow, there's a universality with this. And during college, I was, questioning, like having these existential questions, like, what is the meaning of my life? Is my job my life? Am I just adopting what my mom and my dad are doing culturally? Like, I'm still a good person, but why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And I think what I wanted was like sharing my faith and having that connection with other people, and having kind of it's like faith is like a relationship. And I think that's what helped me in my Catholic upbringing, like just having that conversation with other people about questions, even if they were hard questions, like, I don't believe this, but we need to have those conversations. So yeah, I don't know if I'm rambling on, if that answered your questions.
No, yeah, thanks, David. That did answer the questions. And I'm gonna drop the last question.
I just wanted to ask the Jerick one. Did you want to say anything or add anything to that?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So I grew up basically in the Philippines until when I moved here in the 3rd grade. So I grew up in Cebu. So the big thing there was the Santo Niño. And then growing up, I guess when we questioned the faith, he would always like tell me like, oh, be careful, or you'll get the idea of like, if you like do disrespectful stuff like religion, they tell you like there's gaba, or like divine retribution. And I grew up with that mentality, and then I kind of brought that here to the US. But with my grandparents, they were Catholic, but they were like, my grandfather was anti-clerical. He would go to mass like a few times of a year, and then during Holy Week, I would remember he would go to the procession, but his thing was that he would only follow St. Peter, the statue of St. Peter, during the procession, because it will give him good luck during the sabong. And that's how I grew up like Catholic. And then they would always like criticize the priests, but the thing was they would still go to mass and like do the normal stuff. But growing up, it was that idea. And then my mom was religious. Like she had a strong devotion to the Santo Niño, and that's what like influenced me growing up, was that like close connection with that. And then when I went to college, it was I studied philosophy, so reading like Sartre, Nietzsche, and all those stuff kind of made me question my faith. And it was like I went through like a faith crisis at that point, and it was like I was adopting like Nietzsche and Sartre's ideas, and it made more sense to me. But later on, it was like going deeper and deeper. I found it like at the end, it wasn't like answering like the questions like that was going through and like challenging my faith. But it was later on that I guess I reconnected with my faith more in the intellectual side rather than just like the emotional and spiritual side. And I think like now it's like what like helps me deal with like issues like and problems I have in my life. And yeah, it's like basically that intellectual background that Catholicism brings, like all that 2,000 years of like long time to think about stuff, like helps me like navigate now in the world now for like the tough questions that comes with like encounter with different peoples and backgrounds.
Yeah, and I kind of want to just circle back to that identity question, the way that Catholicism has impacted your identity, the way it's affected the way you view yourself. I know I've heard some people talk about shame here. Sometimes, some people, for Mitch, like it's just empowering, they find it very empowering. Yeah, feel free if anyone wants to add and answer that one. Oh, thanks for sharing, Jamie, in the chat. I'll go ahead and save that.
I can kind of expand on it a little bit. I really loved all the conversations, and Mitch, I don't by any means want you to think any of my comments were like, oh, like I don't see the beauty in the tradition of the Catholic faith. So please trust and believe that that conflict exists in me, because there's so many beautiful areas like the Marian tradition that teaches me about the feminine divine that I tap into regularly. Like, even though I'm not a practicing Catholic, in times of comfort, I do still like pray the rosary, just out of again, it was training wheels for me. So like when I'm looking for that space, I still do some of the rituals just because it gives me that comfort and peace, because that's how I learned spirituality. I just wanted to touch on a couple things. So one, I think now that I'm in academia and I am a doctoral researcher, I feel that the aspect of me that does believe that rational and reasoning shouldn't be suspended in one's life, that value that I have a conflict with religion and it not being able to explain certain aspects. I think Jerick was talking about Nietzsche, and I'm just like, that's amazing, because when you start getting into the philosophy of what's good and moral, there's so many parts of Catholicism that is not good and moral. There's a lot of things in our culture that aren't good and moral that make it hard for me to even visit when I see like maids and drivers treated like second-class citizens. And a lot of that I feel comes from the colonization and the colonial mentality, which was spurred by Catholicism. So I have issues with that. I do think that it does provide a great framework for what is right and wrong, but I also question if you need punitive consequences in order to learn moral things. And there are other religions that are not so punishing or judgmental that I've explored. And I do see that there is a beauty in Jesus and believing in Jesus, but I also think there's a beauty in other deities that others believe in. So I don't understand why people have to believe in just one religion or Jesus is the only way. That's a difficult thing for me. And then lastly, I did want to talk about, questions of what happens when you die and why do we suffer? I mean, there are other traditions that explain this, that Catholicism doesn't necessarily need to do that. But I do feel that it is forced upon us in Catholicism, and the constant having to think about that from that Catholic paradigm, again, puts this pressure on, let's live for when we go to heaven, not for today, not for how we act, in this moment. And so it's something that I struggle with philosophically, which is probably why, so much of how I practice Catholicism has changed. It gets down to the philosophy and how we got to the point that we did historically. And I need those historical underpinnings to be present when I'm thinking about spirituality and how I would pass that on to my child.
Great, thanks for expanding on that. Joe, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to revisit what I shared. I'm trying not to bring shame to my parents right now. But, I think for me, it was the language difference. I never learned Tagalog in the house. My parents spoke Tagalog to one another. So even their ability to explain things of the faith, I just don't think transferred well. But there were moments because I had a fear of death for so long, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I was in my mom's room up to 4th grade. But she explained to me a really good sense of what heaven is in her simple terms. And then my dad, not through words, but through actions, he's very much a Saint Joseph, just keep your head down and do hard work, etc. But the other things I wanted to add too is that, flash forward, I'm diagnosed with bipolar right at the pandemic, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I've always had this sense since early college of suffering, death, resurrection. I didn't really understand it until, again, learning more, talking more with mentors and from other people. This is kind of what Mitch was saying earlier about the beauty of the church. But that this suffering, death to self, and resurrection is occurring within me every day. And is as traumatic and as suffering that was for me and my family and my kids, like I see a lot of fruits from that. And so again, just from my own experience of like there has to be meaning, and wherever it is that God calls me to, even though my own weaknesses, as much as my Filipino culture wants to hide my weaknesses, and my parents want to hide weaknesses, there's so much strength in them embracing weakness, I think. And the other thing was suffering, death, resurrection. Shoot, I forget. But yeah.
Just so I'm understanding you, Joe. So it's after your bipolar diagnosis, it was you founded that faith helped your family kind of.
Yeah. That's a loaded question, but I had already had experience of like these kind of, I call them resurrection moments, where there breathes new life in these awful things that I've experienced, that we all experience, and my parents immediately, the first reaction when my wife was reaching out to them saying that Joe's having trouble sleeping was like, oh, is he stressed? Is he stressed about money? It's like, no, like, I am feeling all sorts of things. I'm a teacher in the pandemic and e-learning at a Jesuit Catholic high school, and trying to make sense of how e-learning is going was driving me crazy. Sorry, I do remember the other thing I want to say, because I know we're running out of time, is gratitude. And my faith brings a lot of gratitude, especially knowing that all of my dad's side is still in the Philippines right now, and here I am blessed.
Welcome back, everyone. I feel like these discussions were so good, and I don't know if, I was in Ada's group last, and then it got cut. So I feel like these discussions kind of end up like going by really fast sometimes. But yeah, just to be mindful of time, I wanted to just jump into sharebacks from each of the groups. So I'm just gonna pull up, I guess since I was in Ada's group last, does anyone from Ada's group want to share just a couple of points? And if we can just try and keep this to like this whole thing to about 5 minutes, just so we can make sure that we're out on time. Anyone from Ada's group want to share just a couple of main points that came up during the discussion?
Does anyone want to share? Otherwise, I can just share really quick. Yeah, we had a really great discussion. I think is sort of, I think there was talk about Catholicism as just like a foundation for everybody, a foundation, and some people still practice it, some people don't, but you still kind of take these values. And then I feel like there's sort of discussion on kind of like rules of feeling guilt about not doing this, but then trying to find a pathway. And then where we ended before we kind of went back to the breakout session was kind of like a nice reminder that these things can coexist, like mental health. And
cool. Thanks, Ada. I'll hand it over to Karen, or if anyone in Karen's group wants to share.
Or I can also jump in really quick. Everyone had a lot of really great points to say, but I think our main takeaway was that what your teachings were when you were young don't necessarily have to be what you are as an adult. Like, you might be a different person from who your parents want you to be within that realm, and finding it on your own as an adult is acceptable too. And also the implications of being perfect and wanting to do it a certain way is not necessarily accurate, because there are different things that happen in your life that change how you practice Catholicism, how you go to the church or not go to the church. There's just a lot of different things that influence your life and how you have a relationship with your religion.
Oh, thanks, Karen. Matt, does anyone from Matt's group want to share? If not, Matt can share.
Okay, guys. I thought it was a really great discussion. A lot of similar themes as Ada and Karen's group that you guys mentioned. And there was one really interesting question, or a couple actually, at the end when we were talking about what coverage you'd like to see in the future. And one question was about, are there differences in mental health among Filipino Americans who are raised Catholic versus in other faith traditions? And is there something specific about Catholicism that has a different effect than maybe being raised in a Protestant tradition or some other tradition? I thought that was a really interesting idea. And one other question was, what is the different? Where does the Filipino Americanness begin and Catholicism begin? Where does that begin and end? And it's a lot of times just kind of the line is quite blurry. But a really interesting discussion, and I thank everybody in our group for that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, those are great points, and I feel like that could even be a story on its own. But I really appreciate those things coming up. Who knows, maybe that could be a story in the future after the series. Okay, and Jonah, does anyone from Jonah's group want to share? If not, Jonah, you can share.
I'll share really quickly just from my perspective, and anyone else in our group, feel free to add your own. But I see a struggle with, how does the church give us answers or frustrate us with answers on the meaning of suffering, the meaning of especially some teachings that are just, very hard to swallow and accept on blind faith. But yeah, this tension between finding meaning and suffering, but at the same time, this is just from me, my Filipino experience of, we don't talk about suffering, we don't talk about weakness, we don't talk about Bruno, and so there's just such a disconnect, I think, between the Catholic faith and how we respond to suffering, or what we're taught to respond to suffering, versus we're just not going to talk about it at all in the household.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's really great, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that's definitely perspective. We'll see. Again, there's so many different, I think, viewpoints and perspectives that came up in all the groups today. So it's going to be kind of a challenge. I don't think I'm going to be able to include everything, right? But I'll do my best. And then also, again, this could be an opportunity for future coverage, whether it's me or another reporter, because I think, this is important stuff. And so again, just thank you for sharing that. I'm going to throw it back to just Jonah. Was there anything else that you wanted to add from the group, or?
I just love the diversity of perspectives in our group. Just so many different interesting progressions from childhood to adulthood on how that has changed with the role that Catholicism plays, whether from, just doing it for cultural connection or just pretty much as a kid doing it because you're told, and then starting to ask the questions when you get older. I saw a lot of, ideas of beginning to ask existential questions like, what is the meaning of life? What is death? What is suffering? Usually when people either leave home or go to college and see other ways of living life outside of the church, but still also seeking church as community to be among, fellow Filipinos. Especially one person shared they moved states into LA from Kentucky, and just that whole, big shift, but still finding church within that. So I just thought, everyone had such, beautiful, diverse answers in those topics.
Yeah, I agree. So this is, it's great. It's going to be again, difficult to kind of figure out, I think, where to go, but I think it's also great to have so much to work with. So at this point, I think we're kind of coming really close, but just quickly, does anyone have any questions about the group, about the series, or anything? Okay. If not, thank you, Brian. Thank you for being here too. So I'm going to put in the chat a couple of ways that if you're interested in either staying, updated on this project, or if you want to be more involved with the story as I report it, I'm going to put a chat poll. So let me just put that in here. Please feel free to just respond in the chat which number applies to you. And if you're willing to be interviewed, if you totally don't want to stay involved in this project too, that's fine. I appreciate you being here today. And thanks, Matt. Yeah, I was supposed to do that in the beginning, and then I kind of forgot to do that. But yeah, other than that, I'm going to put my email in the chat again one more time, just in case anyone has, I feel like maybe there's probably some points that, not everyone was able to get to. So you can email me here. And just like, you know, if you have any additional thoughts that came up that you weren't able to share. Oh, great. I see a lot of people willing to be interviewed. That's really great. But yeah, other than that,
Agnes, you have a newsletter.
Oh yeah. You know, it always adds this at the end of these focus groups. I have a newsletter where I send out updates about the project. That usually comes out like when I have a story published or when focus groups are happening, although this is the last focus group for the series. But okay, I'll put that in the chat because I always forget to do this. But also, if you are interested in staying updated, then I can manually add you, but this is the link to the newsletter. Am I forgetting anything else, Ada? Because I was going to wrap and then I forgot.
I'm sorry, just making fun of you. Yeah, no, her newsletter is great because she shares like behind the scenes stuff, and yeah, I just wanted to echo and thank everyone for being here. It really, really helps shape the project, and it's been really nice to, you know, this. I think Agnes said this in the beginning, but you know, it's a project she's been working on over the course of a year. So this is the third story. There's 4 stories, and it's been really nice to see like people's reactions, and kind of like kind of watching her build, right? Like you said, you know, Filipino-American mental health. It's like specific but broad, right? So it's kind of like you start from here. What else can you talk about? And kind of and you're all part of that building process. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, that's going to wrap up the session today. I will send the e-gift cards within a week because, like, really appreciate everyone. Again, like on a weekend, you could be having lunch somewhere. So I'm just really grateful. I mean, I always say this to people who like come to the focus group, so I really mean it because, like, I know that the time is important. So just you like being here, it means a lot. So really appreciate it. But we'll wrap. I know we're past the hour. So if y'all need to log off, you can do that. But please feel free to again, like email me, stay in touch, and you know, and then I'll take note of. I see that folks have some folks want to stay updated, so I'll add you to the newsletter. But other than that, thank you, everybody.
I think Jonah does.
Oh, Jonah, did you have a question or were you waving by?
I'm waving by.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Are you just waiting for?
I'm recording, but before we'll start, I'll preface what we're doing right now, and then we'll go into all the discussion and pray, of course. So.
All right. Here's a caller. Here, you could pray. Open your hands up. Let us pray. Sorry.
All right. Let me preface. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hey, what's up, you guys? So I'm here with David and I'm here with Jerick, and we just finished a discussion talking about Filipino and Catholicism and mental health and all the interesting tidbits that went in it. So we're gonna pretty much have a post discussion on it because obviously it was so limited. There were so many things people were talking, and you only have so much time. Like me, David and Jerick only had like one line really to say anything. So there was a whole lot to get into. So let's have some fun. Let's talk about what's going on. We can start from the beginning, and we'll start with prayer and then let's go into discussion. So take it off.
All right, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this time with Mitch and Jerick and me. We pray that you can bless our conversations and make it Christ-centered. Help us to grow in love, to love others, and to become men that you have asked us to be. And we ask the Blessed Virgin Mary to intercede for us as we pray. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of death. Amen. Saint Joseph, pray for us. And Saint Teresa of Avila, pray for us. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Got my Benedict medal right here.
Benedict medal. It's like breath, baby, breath.
I should have did that at the end. I'm so mad.
This guy has like a philosopher's type of. He's like, okay, I'm gonna let you guys know that Jerick is our philosopher of our class. I just want to let you know that. He only touched upon, like, you know, in the interviews, like Nietzsche and then like all the existential philosophers. Sorry. Okay, that's
no. Yeah, let's go with that real quick. Like, who are you guys, real quick, for my audience and everything. Just real quick, one-liners or whatever. I don't know. Go ahead.
What's up? I'm David, and I'm a seminarian for Los Angeles Diocese.
Same year. I'm Jerick. I'm a seminarian also.
So we're discerning, God willing, to be priests, but men are called, few are chosen. So we're still testing that call, but we're here to grow in love and service for the Lord. Yep.
Awesome. All right. So how did you guys feel about that whole thing?
Jerick, you go first.
Oh, and sorry, before you go, thank you, David, for sending me the link. This was so awesome. I it met my expectations. I knew it was really, obviously it's LA Times, very, very woke, very liberal, with the he, hims, she, hers, and everything. So I already knew I was getting myself into. And so even in our small discussion, and I thank God that we were in the same room. And so, yeah, go ahead with your initial thoughts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I think it was just too short.
Yeah.
We basically touched the surface, and we were gonna go deeper, but the time ran out. There's one question that was gonna get us somewhere past the getting to know part.
Yeah.
But then time just killed it.
I have the questions actually that on a Word document, and just so in the future we can also ask Catholics this, how has your Catholicism matured, or how has it developed over time? It's kind of how I kind of saw it is, my initial reaction was I was open to anything, to what they were saying. And I love listening and talking to people with different opinions, and just soaking up in that world. I'm very open. And it was interesting seeing everybody's opinions. Now, I wanted to caveat a lot of things. There's a lot of, the thing is it's funny because Catholicism is universal. There's a part where they said that, oh man, I don't know how to blur the line. There's a line between Catholicism and Filipino. And I'm like, it's because it encompasses the whole person. It's not just one you're categorizing this is me, and it's kind of different sections of books here, genres. Oh, we have this genre, we have this genre. No, what Catholicism does, it it takes over your whole being. God doesn't want just one part of you. He wants the greatest commandment in Scripture is to love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. So that encompasses your whole being. That's the reason why we have martyrs in the church, and from people from France all the way to, we have seminarians from, what's it? Micronesia. See, I was like, what's the country? I was like, I can't think right now. See, I don't even know, and when I was talking, I really wanted to say that there was 3.5 million young adult Catholics during the part that I was talking, and some of them don't speak English. The way that we were broken out into rooms there in World Youth Day, this is 2016, Krakow, Poland. We broke it out by language, by some people spoke Dutch, Spanish, and then you have the English speakers. I said that weird. Okay, sorry, I'm rambling on. But with the LA Times, it was just interesting because I think people only see a surface level of Catholicism, and we were only able to touch on a surface level of Catholicism. The girl, the woman, bless her heart, because she's trying to navigate, she's trying to seek truth. Aristotle in his metaphysics talks about all humans have a desire to know, and that's what and who is all truth? Who is the epitome of truth? God himself. So he's bringing us to himself. But there's many ways, quote unquote, that God will allow these things to happen. But it's ultimately for divine union and love for God. So
Yeah, I think this is also indicative of poor catechesis, right? I would want to venture and guess like how many people in that room believed in real presence in the Eucharist, right? And so if you even know those words, you understand what that means, and then people are like, "What is real presence?" and all that stuff, right? And it kind of goes. One thing that I wanted to jump in with Jerick when he was talking about Nietzsche is the line. I believe it's Nietzsche. He's saying, "To live is to suffer, and to live is to find meaning in that suffering." And I feel that is so powerful in the Catholic Church because whereas in Buddhism, there's suffering. There's this idea of suffering, but you have to let go of earthly things and you have to do it within yourself. But within the Catholic Church, we let go of those things and give it to Jesus because he has suffered for all of us, right? And I think that's more powerful than you yourself trying to gain your own salvation versus that salvation has already won for you. Sure, there's always sanctification and in that process that you have to work towards, but that level of it's already done for you. I think there's so much beauty, and I tried to convey that as best as I can in the short amount of time. I wanted to shortly convey, and I know they were a little perturbed because I expressed it as beautifully as I can, and then for them to be like, well, you know what? I didn't say it wasn't beautiful, and again, bless her heart. I wasn't trying to put her down. Right, and I wanted to. I'm not a type of person, especially in my format. Like, you know, when I come to apologetics, it's always about love, mercy, and compassion. I'm not trying to. The idea is not to win arguments. The idea is to win souls, right? And so I can't just be like, you're wrong because Jesus is the way, the life, the truth. If you be studying Buddhism, like, get out here, you pagan. You know, I can't be like that, right? Yeah. But at the same time, there is some truth. There is objective divine truth in Jesus Christ. And so all of those things don't matter. I'm not saying you can't practice yoga per se. There's portions in which you shouldn't, but the actual idea of meditation, sure. But once you start going into mantras and all that stuff, then obviously, and crystals and essential oils. Then, like,
you got essential oil. I like lavender. Makes me go, come on. All right.
Yeah. But I guess wrapping my thought up, I think this is just very indicative of the poor catechesis in the Filipino community, right? And not just Filipino community. You can venture into all Catholics, right? And so, and it's this idea of culturally Catholic, you know, like you just going through the motions. And I thank God, like, one, I had a strong foundation, but even then, the Holy Spirit manifested to me so much so in 2018 that I told this to David. We talk all the time. We're friends, of course. And so me learning Latin, going to Latin Mass and all this stuff. And again, and even on a Jerick's level, like the intellectual level, right? Because not everyone has joined the Catholic Church during like a spiritual awakening, right? They learned it through an intellectual level. Like I'll throw it out to Caitlin Bennett, right? Liberty Hangout. She married a Catholic dude, and then she started to kind of like go into like, why is the Catholic Church on these issues? Why is it true? Where does the arguments lie? And she found truth in the Catholic Church, and I think that's very powerful. And I think if not even on a spiritual level, if they went on an intellectual level, hopefully, God willing, they can and learn like the truth in the Catholic Church. So yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I really wanted to present this encyclical to them, St. John Paul II's Fides et Ratio, or Faith and Reason. Like right now, we're in a culture that does not know we have forgotten who we are as Catholics, but our identity. Just identity, like what is in the underlying, I think, question that they're asking for all the people in that room is, what is your identity? How do I identify as Catholics, Filipinos, Filipino Americans, but what is our identity? And as Catholics, we could say that our identity is in Christ. Our identity, if we get the humanity of Christ wrong, or Christological anthropology, then we'll get ourselves wrong, because Jesus Christ is a perfect man, this is the new Adam, if you will. And so I don't want to like get too crazy because I feel like but I get really passionate about that. But I think that's what we have forgotten. You know, the ultimate thing is we're beloved children of God, daughters and sons of God, and we have forgotten that. You know, and so as Catholics, it's our job to kind of remind people who they are in the eyes of God, not in the eyes of what are of a philosophical understanding, which is not bad. We can get to a philosophical understanding of God, but we're kind of like in the dark for that, and we either try to make a perfect utopia, or we try to make a perfect Ubermensch or a perfect being, a human being, and it's not going to always work out without divine revelation.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. But the reason why I wanted to say that is because Fides et Ratio is because Catholics are not against philosophical inquiry, and it's not just like faith alone. The philosophical part and the theological part are two sides of the same coin. They're both truth, and so truth always brings us to God Himself. We do have a professor here who had majored in Buddhism, and then you got this guy whose room is just plastered with Buddhist stuff. Like, so like, wow. So I'm gonna throw him under the bus right now. I just kidding. No, but like we're like, there's different shades and hues of Catholicism, and I think they were just trying to put it in a box, but you can't do that with Catholicism because it transcends time. Catholicism transcends time, and if something is true, it will transcend time, even when we die. If we just create our own meaning, then that meaning, and we do that without divine revelation, that meaning will die with us. But with truth, it will transcend after we die, after centuries. You know, that's the reason why we have doctors of the church, because they apply to each and every century, each and every time. And that's my 2 cents. All right, go ahead. My friend's
Buddhism. Wow, David.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
The Holy Office would come after me now.
No, you're good. No, you're good.
No, I think what we're trying to do is, I guess, there was a series before this about colonialism, I guess, colonial like mentality, and I think they're trying to implicate like how Filipino like view themselves more like in a negative light as a result of Catholicism, as like the way they colonized us. But there's like assumptions they have that shows that they didn't really know history. Like there was one thing that got me thinking about was that I guess that Catholicism, I guess, doesn't like bring in good ideas like into the Filipino system. But one thing that I noted before, like, because I took like a course on Philippine church history before, and it was like this idea of justice in the Philippines, like the shift of idea. Because the professor pointed out that in Tagalog, the word for justice is doesn't mean that it's objective. It's more like something that you can like argue about, and that only later on that they borrowed a word from Cebuano, Katarungan, that the idea of objective justice was there. And it shows like there was a shift, like there was no concept that Filipinos had, and they had to borrow it later on from a different like language to enforce like, I guess, the idea of more objective justice. And that was like more of a result of like introduction of Catholicism, because like looking at it, like in early church history in the Philippines, the leaders were hesitant, I guess, in converting, because the requirements was to only have one wife and then let go of slaves. And they were hesitant on that idea, because even the slaves, like the Filipino slaves, even kind of joined them in the revolt, because they would lose like patronage, and where would they go if they were all free? But it was like the idea that like Catholicism like shaped Filipino culture, and we take it for granted now. And like most of our like mentality of like Filipino Catholicism under like the Spaniards and colonization comes from like the books of Jose Rizal and that time period, the 19th century propaganda period. And
we think like all they did was abuse and like brainwash us. And like studying church history, like most of the reports of Spanish abuses came from the Spanish themselves. Like when like it was the priest who would denounce like what the Spaniards were doing to the Spanish authorities, and that's the records we have of what was happening at that time period. And the interesting thing is that the power that the priest received, like that was criticized under like Jose Rizal and them, was because of that. Like they were complaining like what the Spaniards were doing, and that the government gave them authority, I guess, like as someone to intervene, because the government also in the Philippines were complaining against the priests because they were telling them that they can't like take money from like unbaptized, like the Chinese unbaptized, and they were complaining about that. Like we're only getting certain amounts because of the priests are telling them they can't pay to us or that. And that's the thing that Filipinos kind of forget, and that we focus more on like the stuff that comes in like the 19th century. And the thing is, even when during the revolt, there were like many stuff, the whole division between like the Philippine government was that there was a group of the revolutionaries that would arrest like the priests and execute them, and Andres Bonifacio was one of those group. But then there was the other group under Emilio Aguinaldo that was like saying, no, we can't do that. We can't like execute a friar just because they're a friar in Spanish. And that was like the tension they had. And then for Aguinaldo's part, he was a devout Catholic, and his in his group of the Katipunan is named after Saint Mary Magdalene, the Magdalo. And that's the thing that we forget, is like Catholicism both enhanced like during the revolution, both Spanish and the Filipinos cling to that. And the interesting story was that in Cebu, when there was a revolt, both sides were claiming the Santo Niño as like their protector. And when they stormed in, when the Filipinos like stormed in to the Fort San Pedro where all the Spanish were in, they were saying like "Viva Santo Niño" as they were going in. And that's like Filipino Catholicism like actually like helped shape Filipino like identity of independence. And the thing is, Philippine Revolution like didn't start with Jose Rizal and them. It actually started like the priests, the secular priests, fighting for recognition, and that Rizal even acknowledges that in his like dedication of his second novel, the most dark one, the darkest one, El Filibusterismo. He acknowledges that the three priests, Gomez, Gumborza, and Zamora, like awakened the Filipino identity, and that like the Filipino identity is like not changed by Catholicism, but more enriched or much more elevated or much more like.
Is it like what you're saying, is it kind of like a Thomistic sense of grace perfects nature?
Yeah, basically.
So it doesn't take away their sense of identity, but it actually a sense of Catholicism enhances and perfects that sense of identity within them.
Yeah, it takes the bad parts and like takes them away and like focuses on the good, because like I mean this whole idea of like decolonization and stuff, you can't tend to forget that pre-colonial Philippines was not a great place, like a utopia. Like there were like jars found in Leyte that would mention human sacrifices, and that they would sacrifice humans whenever the datu or the head of the community, the chief, was sick. And that's like something like they forget. And there was like other stuff like slavery, and that slavery didn't end like under just like the Filipinos. It ended when the Spanish came in, because even like in the South, the slavery continued, and they would still go into Christian territories and like take slaves. And that was like a big thing in the Philippine history. And that's where much of the stuff that we take for granted now is like, we think that pre-colonial Philippines was like a utopia, like a Disneyland basically.
And he has
I mean, like, you studied this, so you probably have all the primary documents to back all this up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so this whole idea, and then you're touching upon it with this whole colonialization. I think they had a different topic on that, and it's a very left-wing type of point, and it's this idea of deconstructing, and it's always a viewpoint in which Western civilization, Catholicism, is viewed as a negative, right? But when they talk about colonization, they totally leave out how Islam has done it 1,000 years prior, you know, and so it's always in the view of Western civilization. It's always view of Catholicism as bad, and then where they have some truth, because so they have some truth in which people have done bad things, and so they expanded on that, and so like they attach that, okay, well, the Catholic Church is bad because certain people have done bad things, right? And it goes into again with other people saying like, oh, you know, all the religions are cool, and it goes into like not even like this idea where the guy was saying like, oh, we can't even question our suffering and all that stuff. Like, I'm sorry, like your family didn't do that, or you couldn't find that in your own life. But like I especially my relationship with my father has increased because obviously he's very practicing as well, and so my relationship with my father increased because we could talk about all of the deeper stuff, right? And now that I'm of age, way better, I guess, in life, and knowing a little bit life now, and so I can talk about these deeper conversations. And it's just unfortunate that they view this as, they want to view Catholicism as something that is old and outdated, and it is hindering to progress, right? And some of them, and thankfully so, some of them can't let go of that completely. They say, like, I can hear them, I can talk and listen to them, and while they have issues, they still go back to the Catholic Church. And I pray that there's still a lot more grace, that they can fully invest their lives into Jesus, because there, again, like I said, there's beauty in it. And so hopefully whatever they're looking for, they can look into the Catholic Church. And so, and again, it's just this way of trying to, like I said, like view Catholicism as a negative and all that stuff. And so yeah.
And I was just like, man, there's a richness in the Catholic faith that you guys are missing. And the question is does that fall in the hands of the pastors or bishops or even our lay people? You know, there are some encyclicals talking about how the lay people, I kind of see it like a water system or something, like tributaries, where you receive that grace and in Mass and through the sacraments and through personal prayer, but the priest can only, especially diocesan priests, they can only stay within their boundaries of their diocese. Now, as lay people, they can go everywhere. They can go out to the workplace. They could go out to your shop, or like going out shopping and, I don't know, just finding someone random or talking to the cashier and then talking about Jesus Christ, you know. And priests are not always, I think some people might be scared of talking about their faith, and that's the reason why we need to be comfortable as Catholics giving the gospel or offering the gospel with our lives and how we talk. And I can't talk clearly. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Cool. Any other things you guys want to throw in with that whole virtual meeting and anything that stood out, or any closing remarks, I guess? My laptop is dying, that's why.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, we can continue the discussion after, but I kind of, at least for this video, we'll wrap it up, and I'm still down to talk some more.
I think it's faith-seeking understanding, where we can come to an intellect. You can come at it from different ways, but coming from a place of belief, and then having that faith mature through intellectual growth or truth finding, not being stagnant on where you are in your faith, just like going through the motions. You have to reflect on, we do, even right now with mental health, Catholics should consider that. We we still have body, soul, you know? And so I see it like a spiritual workout. You still have to strengthen your soul in prayer. And then also mental health is very important, you know, as Catholics. Even in seminary, in the PPF, the Program for Priestly Formation, there's a human dimension where it talks about your mental health. Like it's encouraged that we actually seek out therapists for our own well-being. You still have to talk about this. I will say that masculinity, like how we need to speak about our sufferings, and like iron sharpens iron, men sharpen other men. And so we have to be talking about our we can't just, no man is an island unto himself. So we can't just like, just keep all of our problems for ourselves. That's the reason why in seminary, as well as outside, we need groups of men, Catholic men, just to talk about the sufferings and trials and tribulations that we're going through. So it's not just yourself, but you need, like, friendship is really, really important. And talking about that, your problems is important for your mental health and for your just sanity.
Yeah, David points out is actually good. And I think that's like the good thing is that we're able to share, and we have a common thing to go to. Like, we have a common experience or like meaning for us Catholics, and that it's centered on Jesus Christ. And then looking at it is like, we can always talk about like, oh, I get independence from this if I create my own meaning. But if we have our own meaning, how can we communicate? Like, if I speak to him in my language, like in Cebuano, he won't understand. And if we have our own meaning like that, like, where's the connection? And I think that's the thing now in the world. It's like they feel alienated because of that. Like, they create their own meaning and no one understands them. And it's that desire to connect with other people that like the world like suffers from right now. And that's where Catholicism can come in and tell them that, oh, like, you're not alone in this, and that you're not like some wandering like molecule out there that can't connect with anyone. And that's the beauty of Catholicism, is that it brings us in together and it opens us up for relationships and other people. And that's the great message of Christianity, and that it's like opening up to something greater than us, and that's something that we can enter in with other people. It's not just you. It's not just me versus everyone else. It's us in one person, in Jesus. And that's like the beauty I see in it. And like the community aspect is something we should highlight more now.
Yeah, I guess my takeaway is that in Filipinos and Catholicism and mental health, I think there's this idea in which prayer, a lot of it can be like, oh, just pray it away, you know, just walk it off type thing. And so there's a level in truth that where this conversation is, and they want to get rid of that. And I see that if you're treating Catholicism as very like just like very superstitious, right? And very nominal Catholic, and like, oh, just pray it off. Like, why didn't you go to church or that thing? But at the same token, don't dismiss it outright. Like, go to Jesus, give your sufferings to Jesus, and you like there can be miracles, you know. And not to say that you should only do that, right? You should be going to your friends, going to a therapist, or whatever that you feel that will help you in that mental health. But I think it's twofold. One, don't dismiss it outright, but at the same time, don't treat it as, oh, just pray a rosary and everything will be okay, right? And so I think that's where this conversation is, and I think it's more on that second point where it's like just very, again, with this very culturally Catholic, you know, like just like where they don't actually believe in the divinity. To put it bluntly, that they don't believe in the divinity of Jesus, where you can actually give him your problems and be at the foot of the cross. And so, but again, obviously I believe like you can, and obviously still find resources and everything. So we'll have a conversation. We'll continue this conversation, but I just want to end it here. Hey everyone, thank you again for watching. You can comment below, tell me what you think in this conversation. And if you like this video, please like and share and subscribe, and see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Peace, peace, peace. Be with you.